This is Uncommonly Remarkable, where we discuss the surprising everyday lives and notable accomplishments of community leaders, entrepreneurs, and everyday folks like you and me. My name is Artis Beatty. I am a doctor of optometry and the chief medical officer for My Eye Doctor OD. Though we will inevitably touch on topics within my area of expertise, the opinions and the conversations held here are separate from my work with My Eye Doctor. Today's guest is the founder and managing partner of Invidia Capital Management, a healthcare-oriented private equity firm based in New York and focused on upper middle market investments in North America. Jo Natauri describes herself as quiet, thoughtful, practical, and a mom. Having over 25 years of experience in the healthcare investment industry, Jo approaches healthcare from a vantage point that I find both interesting and unique. Have you ever considered all the pieces of healthcare and healthcare delivery beyond what happens in the provider's office? From pharmaceuticals to technology to delivery systems and research, this complex field is where Jo has devoted her career, bridging banking and healthcare in meaningful ways. Learn what inspired her thinking, how she finds balance, what it's like to graduate high school when you're barely old enough to drive. Hear about her early career in banking, stepping away, how she grew to become a partner at Goldman Sachs, and much, much more in this episode. Ladies, gentlemen, all you remarkable people, please help me welcome Jo to the show. Welcome, Jo. It is so exciting to have you on the show with me today.
Thank you so much, Artis. Glad to be here.
I can't believe we're able to put it together. You know, like you're super busy. You're all over the place, and I really appreciate you taking the time. You know, I have invited people to the show, and we've had calendar conflicts, and we've looked for times, and it was hard to make it all work.
Yeah.
And you said, "Let me figure it out." Boom! You planned it. You're here, and it's great. So welcome.
Thank you, Artis. Appreciate it.
So I'm so excited because I really don't know exactly where we're going to start because, I think you've had an amazing career so far. You've got so much more to do. You've been very influential for both healthcare and specifically for women in healthcare. And so we're just going to talk about it all.
Sure.
Perfect. So, maybe we start by talking a little bit about what you're doing now, and then we can go backwards a little bit and start to build up to it again. How's that?
That sounds great.
Okay.
So what am I doing now? So I've started and I've launched a private equity firm focused in healthcare. Very excited about it. Obviously, Artis, you knew that I did that at Goldman Sachs for a long, long time. And this is an opportunity to really think about, I think, healthcare in a very different way. We're focused in kind of growth-oriented middle market companies. That's where we're spending the time. And the idea is to really be healthcare thesis-driven. So thinking about a very complicated sector that interacts in a variety of ways. Like when you think about the diversity in healthcare, you have biotech on one side, you have hospitals on the other, and everything in between. And it's actually important to understand what's happening across the spectrum. And I really wanted to set up a fund that thinks about that, thinks about where healthcare is going, and really support the growth in healthcare, which is an area that I think is sometimes not thought through in terms of where the puck's moving.
Yeah, you make a good point about the broad nature of healthcare because, when you say healthcare in general, you start to think about maybe the time you spend with your primary care physician or what happens if you were to go to a hospital or maybe you need some rehabilitation. But it's really broader than that because there's lots of pieces of the industry that are not even patient-facing that are important for the healthcare experience.
Yeah. I mean, if you take one of the biggest topics today, which is around GLPs and weight loss, that's a pharmaceutical drug that was developed, obviously having a major impact. But when you think through the ripple effect through the industry, both from the individuals who are eligible and taking the drug, the potential consumer side of the drug, how to handle it's not straightforward, right? There are side effects. There are things you need to consider. So who's taking care of those patients? Who's paying for it? Long term, the early data suggests that it does prevent real chronic and acute risks in patients. So maybe it should be paid for by payers. Is it just a aesthetic? The questions are complex, and all the different constituents are varied, right? You have to think of the patient, the provider, the payer, the employer. And so working through that is going to take some time, but I find that fascinating because I think there will be a solution in terms of where we end up, but it's going to be a long and winding road to figure it out. But that's I think one of the best things about thinking about healthcare is you have to think through all those pieces.
Well, and even with thinking about it from these medications or drug standpoints, you still have to think about the pharmaceutical industry. You have to think about the researchers. You have to think about delivery systems. Like there are lots and lots of pieces that go together. That
manufacturing, which is a big issue now.
And protecting the supply chain. I mean, there have been issues with quality of the medication. There have been some counterfeit medications. And so being able to think about how to umbrella all of those things is very, very complex.
It's a complicated problem. Yeah.
This is not new to you. You've been in healthcare for a pretty long time, right?
Over 26 years, which is insane. Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about where you started 26 years ago. Like what brought you into the healthcare arena?
Yeah. So I was always into sciences. My majors in UVA were biology and econ. But, the real reason, and I haven't quite done what I set out to do that many years ago, but I worked with a quadriplegic professor at UVA, and it was hard. And I wasn't at that point mature enough to understand exactly what the issues were, but I knew it was wrong to see a professor deal with things like healthcare insurance, getting his caregivers there on time. I mean, what he had to deal with was so complicated, and I just felt in my gut that there was something better. And I really wanted to go into healthcare policy. And that's when I decided, I take a break and understand the business side of healthcare. Banking was typically a 2-year program. So I thought I would do that for a couple of years and then go get my master's of public health and go into policy.
I see.
Yeah. So it was the only industry I wanted to work in. It was probably not the best career advice to walk into every interview and say, I only want to do healthcare. But it worked out, I guess. And it was true. I didn't have interest in the other industry verticals. So that's how I started, and I ended up staying in finance, but really seeing healthcare from a lot of different perspectives.
That it's interesting that was your entry point, because a lot of people who go through the similar experiences, they see where a patient is having trouble or someone is suffering, they make the decision to go into healthcare, but on the provider side. And you looked at it and said, how can I actually improve the systems around the provider rather than being on the provider side, which is just an interesting thought.
Yeah, no, look, it's not that I hadn't thought about going to be a doctor. I graduated high school at 16, and my school choices, one of them, in addition to UVA, I got a full scholarship to the Medical College of Virginia to do undergrad and finish med school. And it was not an easy decision to turn that down. I think at that age, I knew at my core I probably wasn't ready to make that kind of decision. But, also it doesn't help that I get really impacted by seeing people in pain. And so shots. And there was one point where I was observing a surgery where I passed out. The person was in pain. So, I think I knew that would have been a challenge going into that field, although I'm sure there's certain areas I probably could have studied.
That's fair. It's interesting because one of the folks that I talked to early on, his name's Dave Hunt, was a Navy pilot, and he suffers from motion sickness.
Yeah.
And so, you think, oh my gosh, this guy's flying these planes for the Navy and he's suffering from motion sickness. How did you do it? And very similarly, it may have been tough for you to get over, I don't like to see people in pain and do the medical and be the provider there. But it's just interesting how people actually, it can be really tough to overcome, but you chose a different path. But you kind of breezed over. You graduated high school at 16. How did that happen? Like, that's one of those things you mentioned, but you got to explain that a little bit.
Yeah. So I grew up in a really small town in Southern Virginia. And, I was in North Carolina while my dad was doing his grad work at NC State. And he ended up, he wanted to be a professor. So we ended up going to Southern Virginia. And I was in first grade, I think, and or second grade, and I just wasn't doing well in math, and my dad just did not understand it. And the teacher was like, she's just not paying attention, and so the school actually decided to put me in remedial math. And the person there was just like, this is just way too easy. And then after like a couple of months, she was like, I think she's just bored.
Oh.
And so they ended up figuring out that was the issue, and had me skip a grade. And obviously that was that. It was interesting. My parents didn't actually want me to skip the grade because I think they were worried about the age question. And so I had to, for 5 years, I think, until I got to middle school, 4 years, report to homeroom in the younger grade, and then the rest of, because my parents just
that's
do it. Yeah.
Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Wow.
They wanted me to make the decision when I was a little bit older. So then obviously when we were going to middle school, I went ahead with a higher grade. But
being the youngest person in class does pose a separate set of issues. And there are instances where you can be a year younger than other people just by virtue of where your birthday falls and how you start school.
Yep.
So I graduated high school at 17. So I was younger than most people, but it's because of how my birthday fell and some weird things.
Yeah.
And it doesn't pose a lot of problems in most situations, but it does get weird when everybody else goes to learn to drive and you're not quite old enough to go to driver's ed.
Yeah.
And then it poses problems when you go to leave home and you're going to a college campus and you're that much younger than everybody else. So it can be. So I understand where your parents were coming from.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I was way too young. And, to supplement high school, I also took college classes. And so I had done 2 years of college too. Going into college. But the reason I stayed for 4 years, I think I knew I was just way too young.
Yeah.
So they had a point, but we figured it out.
So you go from making the decision, I'm going to move into the finance world post-college. Where did you go first?
So I started, again, like I had no one really giving me career advice. So I went to all my interviews saying I wanted to be in healthcare. And at the time in 97, 98, when I was interviewing, Alex Brown was one of the best healthcare investment banking groups out there. So all the banks, have all the industry groups, but specific groups within the banks tend to be better.
Okay.
And Alex Brown had one of the best ones out there. And the guy who ran the group, Russ Ray, I interviewed with him and he hired me on the spot. To this day, he's still a mentor of mine. But just learned a ton. And I think that's what I tried to do my whole career. Mm-hmm. I love working for people that I can learn from. That's actually very, very important to me.
It's important to be able to say that.
Yeah.
Right. Because part of what I enjoy every day is learning something new. And
Yep.
I often start my day, if not always start my day, with looking to learn something that I didn't know. So I start very early in the morning. I find a YouTube channel or I read an article. I try to learn something different. But for my entire career as well, it's been all about what am I going to learn as time goes on. And I think that's something that you have to personally commit to doing that, right? And
Yep.
then you have to also be able to make the decision. I'm not learning what I want to learn. Now, what is my next step?
Right.
And so, did you work in that same bank for until you started with Goldman Sachs in 2006?
No, Alex Brown, so it's a lot of bank mergers or combinations, I guess. At the time, like I said, it was one of the better healthcare banks out there. So I think a year and a half after I joined, Credit Suisse acquired the group.
Okay.
And Alex Brown became part of Deutsche Bank. So my year and a half was actually pretty eventful. Deutsche Bank bought Alex Brown, and then my specific group was bought by Credit Suisse. And so the team that I was with, we ended up splintering. So I joined the Credit Suisse side, and then half the people stayed at the Deutsche Bank side.
I see. If we think about life events as seasons or chapters, what did you take from that experience with all the splintering, right? That set you up for your next chapter or season?
Yeah, I mean, I think, look, banking is not an easy industry.
Mm-hmm.
I think the metric for success there is really resiliency. To have to go through two of those events early in my career and getting to the other side, I think it just it gave me a lot of perspective, to deal with the challenges, because I think it just became part of the job. It was it's in the job description to deal with things. And so that was helpful, one, to go through that and come out of the other side.
I've heard that from other people around the banking industry that it's tough. I've also heard that around large consulting firms, and the consulting industry is pretty tough. And so you came out of the other side, and like, where did you go from there? Because I'm trying to figure out like what led you to look at Goldman Sachs,
Yep.
because you had kind of a rocket career at Goldman Sachs. And so you obviously had something that was preparing you to get there. And then you landed and did great things.
Yeah. I mean, I left banking. I don't know if you knew that. I left banking for a bit of time. I was burned out. I was kind of my middle VP years. I think I'd been working for 8 or 9 years at that point without a break. And it was, in banking, you're working 7 days a week. You really don't have a holiday. You're working on vacation. It's a lot. And so I was pretty burnt out at that point because I didn't go back and get my MBA. I kind of got promoted through. And so I thought I was leaving forever. And I went to work for a company called SciTech. It's now was acquired by Hologic. But at the time, it was a leader in women's health diagnostics.
Okay.
So I was in the strategy and M&A function there, and I helped lead some of the M&A that happened, and it was great because I got to see healthcare again from a different perspective. I was working at a company, understanding how things actually got done versus just advising and leaving. Got to see the other side of it. It was very instructive. I worked with some great people. But that was in Boston. And for personal reasons, I had to get back to New York. And so I basically did a full circle. The people that I was with and had worked with at Credit Suisse actually ended up at Deutsche Bank. So I just kind of went over with people that I knew. So that's, like I said, I think that's probably the theme. I like to learn from people and work with people that I respect and like. Culture is pretty important to me. So that's how I ended up there. And then it was weird. Within like a handful of weeks, I got a call from Goldman, Morgan Stanley, and JP Morgan, all looking for someone like at my level or in the industry that I was spending time in. And it was funny. I really had no interest because I was like, oh, I'm happy where I am. I'm treated very well. It's all going so well. And I think because the calls all came in at the same time, my friend kind of pushed me to say, "Hey, look at it, and then figure it out." So
Yeah.
I went through the whole interview process with all three. And the thing that struck me at Goldman was the people that I had met. And I was like, look, if I'm ever going to be really good, I need to work for someone who's really good.
Yeah.
And everyone I met there, it was just like night and day. And I knew I could learn a lot there. And interestingly enough, Goldman was the one firm that told me to take a step back 1 year.
Really?
They didn't make the decision easy, that's for sure. So it took some time to think about it, but I did it again with the thought that I'm going to learn from the best.
Yeah.
And that's why I went over.
So during that year, what were you doing? What happened?
So, at the time, not a lot of people lateraled, what they call lateraled in to Goldman.
Got it.
Almost everyone was born and raised, right? So it was challenging to kind of integrate, but I found some great people to work with who gave me a shot. I mean, literally, that's kind of what it came down to. And worked my butt off, and it became I guess people understood that I knew what I was doing. And so when you can kind of prove that out and you gain that trust, you get more responsibility. And so that's probably the way it went.
And so this is around circa 2006 or so?
2006, yeah.
Okay. And so from 2006 to 2012 is when you became partner. Is that right?
Yep.
Okay.
Became MD. I was promoted to MD in 2008.
Wow.
And then partner in 12. Yeah.
Wow. And I'll ask this question because I don't know the answer, and it's a candid question. Is that typical or atypical? Because it just seems like you lateraled into Goldman, and you worked really hard, and in a 6-year span, you went from I'm here to managing director to partner.
Yeah. I mean, I think the managing director at Goldman, stayed true to its word. They said, look, if you're on track, we'll promote you. We're not going to hold you back. And so that was a conversation I had, and to their credit, they didn't. But 4 to 6 years is pretty typical between MD and partner. And so I made it in 4.
Yeah.
So
that's that is pretty amazing to me. So you've got to now tell me what did you learn in that 4-year span that you're still carrying with you today because it's really important for you?
From the MD to partner.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's always just growing. That's the thing that I loved about, again, working at Goldman, and I'm sure at other firms it's similar. You can kind of see what the more senior people are doing. And that's what I did those 4 years. I was like, look, if I'm trying to get there, how do I get there? And it's really by looking up. And you're not, and acknowledging you're not exactly that person. So there's differences in how you approach things and how they approach things, but you can take pieces of what people do and learn from them and grow from them. So yeah, so those 4 years, it was a lot of that, like understanding what it took, seeing other people in that seat. How do I get there? And, again, work a lot.
Well, and being part of Goldman gave you a different perspective, I would imagine, kind of looking at healthcare globally.
Yep.
And so for most of us, we spend our time looking at the U.S.-based healthcare system and understanding those things that are both important for the U.S. and kind of how things function in the U.S. from a healthcare perspective.
that's not necessarily indicative of what's happening everywhere. And so you had the opportunity to look at global healthcare while working with Goldman.
Yeah, and I also it was unusual. It is unusual actually for bankers to cover the companies that I did.
Hmm.
Typically, bankers stay within a subsector, so you'll see a banker focused on pharma or biotech or med tech or and I actually spent time in all the sectors. My list was very, very diverse. It was a lot more work to do that, but it was also good in that I made choices on accounts based on what I needed to do for my family. So at the time, when I made partner, I think I just delivered my second, but I have 3 kids, as you know, and I had to figure out a way to balance what I was doing with taking care of them.
Mm.
And so part of the decision was to spend time in a diverse variety of sectors, especially if I could consolidate my time, make my travel more efficient, get home. But it was a good learning. It was great because it challenged me to really learn more, to be relevant in more areas. Um,
And and that's actually something that's important for me because when I ask people ordinarily to describe themselves or think about words that describes themselves that will describe them, and one of the words you used was mom, and so in that you've talked about how busy you were and what the dedication is, but you were raising a family in the process. How else did you balance that? And did you ever feel that you were sacrificing one for the other?
You're always feeling that way. I think the only solution is prioritization.
Mm,
You just have to know when or be disciplined around when one thing's important over the other. Family always comes first, so that is a priority. But there's certain things that you just don't miss. So I remember I had a meeting with I think it was the CEO of GE. I had just picked up the account. And I had to cancel because my son had his poetry jam in second grade or something for 15 minutes. But that was important, so you do it.
yeah, that's
Uh,
awesome. That is
yeah,
incredible.
but you miss some things. Like I'm not there to pick up, I'm not there to drop off all the time for the kids, but I try to be there for the important things and make sure that they know that. But yeah, that's the way I've done it. Everybody does it differently, so.
Well, is that your bit of advice that you would give other moms who are trying to balance career and family?
So I get asked this question a lot, as you can imagine. I try not to give advice. I kind of say what I do, um, but everyone has to figure it out on their own. Everyone does it a little bit differently. The only thing I do say is don't be afraid to ask for help. It is not 100% on you.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, everybody does it differently, and I feel like sometimes when you get asked, it can easily tip into being judgmental,
Ah.
and so I try not to do that.
That's fair. That's fair. I think, and I'm going to try not to ask what a lot of people ask. Maybe I'll do it differently, right? Because being in a position career wise where there are fewer people that look like me, um, people will often ask me questions around like, how do I think about what people, minorities in position? And it's a very difficult question because although I think your skill and your merit play a lot of what positions you, there are other factors that are involved. And while I want to make sure that I am being the best I can in my position, I'm trying to look also for making it possible for anybody who has the skill set and the ability to also be in a position. And so the way I'll ask this is, are there things that you have learned along your way that you would tell people to think about or look out for when they're trying to be successful, if they are in a minority group, whether that be ethnically or from a gender perspective, or what have you?
Yeah, I mean, it was a long lesson learned because, to be thoughtful around it isn't easy.
Mm-hmm.
It was never easy for me to walk into a boardroom and be not only the only woman of color, and also someone who looks young,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's like the three strikes were always there for me. But what really worked for me was to really be my authentic self. And I think it was when I started to have kids that I had no choice. The energy that I had between working and raising kids to try to be someone I wasn't, it didn't work anymore. And so I think when I started to do that, it just became easier because I didn't have to pretend. I was who I was. I was confident in what I was doing.
Yeah.
And I think that came across. And I made decisions, and I think people actually respected me for it. So
Yeah, and being respected for the work that you do and the decisions you make. I mean, that's the holy grail, right? Like, I think we all want opportunity, and we all look for ways to get the opportunity to make the decision or to show the work. But once you are recognized for the decision or the work, I think that's when you really start to feel fulfilled, and people then really truly respect that you are capable of doing what you set out to do.
yeah, yeah, I think that's right.
Well, then tell me a little bit then about some of the things that you're proud of from when you worked with Goldman, because I I kind of looked at some of the things that I find interesting, and I'm wondering if they're on the list. So, and so
What did you find interesting? I'm sure.
that you were a lead investor for launch with GS with Goldman Sachs, and
Yeah.
I think that I find that really interesting, and I would love for you to talk about that a little bit if it makes your list, of course.
Yeah, no. I mean, look, I think generally it does make my list, but I think, I've always approached supporting women as just part of what I do. And I think that's different than being proactive or not. It's like a different place to sit, I think. In due course, I'm proud of that. I mentored a lot of women. I've led a lot of diversity initiatives at Goldman. That the launch with GS was one of them. But even in kind of my career, like backing women as an investor,
Yeah.
was really important to me. So, supporting Sue, for example, at My Eye Doctor, Linda at MedVed, it was really, it was just important to me, but it was important in a way that it was just part of who I am versus being conscious about it.
That's fair. That's fair. And you've had the opportunity to be involved in things along the way that were outside of the Goldman umbrella. Like you may currently still be on the board of directors for Safe Horizon.
I
Is that
am.
right? Okay. So can you talk a little bit about just Safe Horizon in general and what drew you to be on that board?
So, Safe Horizon is the largest nonprofit focused on domestic violence in the country. Like you probably figured out, I don't have a lot of extra time. The stuff that I choose very carefully, and the organization is amazing. It does so many things for the city and the area around New York around this issue. It's really on the leading edge of a lot of initiatives around domestic violence nationally. and a real thought leader. And this is one area that's particularly important to me, both from how I think about the issue, but also its impact is very akin, I think, to how to think about healthcare. Domestic violence is one of those things. If you look at the stats, high recurrence rate, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Almost every time there's recurrence. That's how it works. And typically the recurrence is worse than the original assault. And its impact is generational. So it's not just the individuals in that particular instance, but you have kids, you have family members. It is a chronic condition with a high degree of recurrence that impacts future generations. And the thing that's frustrating is for something with that high of an incidence, there's just not as much focus as there should be. 1 in 4 women have to deal with this. The stats are incredible. And so, I feel very strongly about the cause. As part of what they do, they take you to some of the services they offer in the city. And one of the sites I visited was related to child abuse as a result of domestic violence. And I think I cried for an hour after that visit.
Oh, yeah.
It's just such a huge societal problem that often gets overlooked with other things.
And if people are interested in learning more about Safe Horizon or even contributing or helping, I'm going to try to link the Safe Horizon in the comment or in the description for this episode so that people can learn more.
That would be great. Yeah, it's such a wonderful organization.
We've talked about a lot of things, and we started kind of where we'll end in that you are founder and managing partner now in a fund that you have helped put together, right? What's next for you?
I think this is next. I think it's growing the team, growing the organization, making good investments. I really love what I do. That's probably number one. And, healthcare, like I said, it's one of the few areas where you can invest and do good. So it really lines up with where I want to spend kind of the next chapter focusing on. So lucky in that perspective.
That's incredible. It's been wonderful just being able to get to know you over time. And again, I can't say thank you enough for taking time out of the schedule because I do know how busy you really are. And so I appreciate the conversation. And if there's ever anything that I can do, please let me know. But I hope that we get to spend time together again soon and maybe get to see each other face to face since it's been a little while.
That would be great. It has been a little while.
So, well, thank you again and try and enjoy the day. It looks like it's going to be a pretty one everywhere
today. Hopefully.
Hopefully. All righty. Bye, Joe.
Bye, Artist. Take care.
And so we end another episode. Thank you so much for spending part of your day with us. I certainly appreciate all your support, so if you enjoyed the content, please like, subscribe, and share the podcast with your friends. The more you share, the more opportunities we will have to bring you great guests and their remarkable stories. And if you want to know more about the guests, get background information on previous episodes, or just learn a bit more about me and the show, visit us at uncommonlyremarkable.com. Feel free to leave me a comment or a suggestion, and if you want to be featured on the show, click the Contact Us button. Until next time, stay remarkable.